The first season of Spectacular Spider-Man was absolutely phenomenal. It hit on a lot of key points that make Spider-Man Spider-Man and did a lot of great and wonderful things, but one thing I always felt that it lacked at was his relationships, specifically his relationships to women, and Peter's long and storied history of love interests. But that's something the second season not only ramps up, but does incredibly well, especially the idea that Peter can't choose a woman to save his life. But I guess when you're as spoiled for choices Peter is, you just can't. I don't know, man, flip a coin. I did it once and it didn't work out, but that's besides the point. When we catch up with Peter, we are firmly in winter and nearing the end of the second quarter of his junior year of high school, if you care about the chronology of these things. Peter himself is still trying to deal with the PTSD that he most likely has from fighting Venom, which is probably his most intimate and dangerous villain he's ever fought in the show up to this point. And he's still struggling with the idea of not only what the symbiote did to him, but the idea of being corrupted by it once again. Luckily for Peter, this is nothing more than a dream because he's got far, far worse things to worry about, such as the absolute bitter cold that's going on outside and the fact that his suit was made in the spring, you know, when it was warm. Also, he's got to deal with a few other things, such as taking care of Aunt May after her heart surgery. He needs to talk to Gwen because, well, Gwen kissed him and he's been dragging his feet on that. He's got to check in on his friend Harry. And in all honesty, Peter is failing woefully at just about all of these things. He's even got biology finals coming up, but is he even really worried about that? But when it comes to Peter's love life, this dude is juggling 3 live hand grenades. Between Gwen, Liz, and MJ, the dude just can't seem to make a decision. And every time he seems dead set on going for Gwen, there's always something popping up keeping him from doing that, such as Liz needing help with her latest biology final, or some parlor trick magician showing up as the new villain of the week.
Fool! Mysterio is no illusionist playing parlor tricks. Mysterio is the master of the arcane arts.
Sure, arcane arts. Anyways, between all of those things, Peter has stretched himself fairly thin and honestly isn't doing a great job at taking care of his love life in general, something we often see as a plot for a majority of Spider-Man films, movies, TV shows, but oddly enough, not really video games. I think the only ones that have really tried to tackle that are like movie tie-in games or Web of Shadows, maybe Insomniac's games, depending on how you quantify it. But either way, despite saying that he's super into Gwen and wants to pursue Gwen, his actions are almost always speaking in a different lane, considering not only how much time he spends with Liz, but how affectionate the two people are for each other physically. I mean, Gwen, after experiencing what is probably one of the most traumatic events in her entire life, on Thanksgiving, went out of her way to kiss Peter and to let her feelings be known. And how does Peter respond? This man does not even bother to validate them, hasn't spoke to her since. And it's not for lack of not wanting to speak to Gwen, it just seems that with the good old Parker luck, every time Peter needs to or wants to speak to her, he ultimately can't. And that just kind of leads their relationship to floundering a little bit, which is not surprising. Pro tip, if a girl kisses you, don't ignore her for the next 2 weeks if you actually like her. On to some more things that are new to season 2, outside of Mysterio, which awesome villain for the first episode of season 2. The damage to Peter's suit throughout the show is fantastic in the second season. His suit is damaged what feels like on an every other episode basis, which is a really cool look, especially considering they rarely did it in the first season with how much damage and punishment this guy takes. And I also absolutely love how this show sets up its characters in advance through world building, such as the identity reveal of Mysterio being the dude who worked for the Chameleon, which helps explain his special effects background, and also is a brand new change for the character, as this is a brand new adaptation that still sticks somewhat close to the original.
You were dressed as the crewman.
As the waiter! You remember? Demitas Spider-Man.
While Peter might be succeeding in his life as Spider-Man, he's done genuinely nothing in his life as Peter Parker outside of hang out with Liz. He hasn't checked a single thing off his list, hasn't talked to Harry, hasn't bought thermal unders, isn't taking care of Aunt May, hasn't spoken to Gwen. Peter is just not succeeding at a lot of the stuff that he set out for himself to do outside of his life as Spider-Man and outside of the academic career, because this dude doesn't study. He literally just shows up and passes. Shout out my senior year of high school. Did not set myself up well for college. But even when all things aren't necessarily going right, some things do. He just got his official exclusive freelance deal, meaning that he is now going to have a steady source of income from taking photos of himself. And the first person he wants to call is Gwen. It's the very first person he wants to talk to. This should signal to Peter that she is the woman on his mind and she is the woman he should pick. But unfortunately, when Peter goes to call Gwen, he instead gets a call from Norman Osborn, who has not only gotten Peter his job back at ESU, but he has also offered Peter mentorship for Norman to be his mentor. And while Peter might find him to be a scumbag, he ultimately can't turn it down, especially with Norman's connection to Harry. So instead of brunch the following morning with Gwen, he instead is going to get breakfast with Norman Osborn. But man, brunch is overrated anyways. All Peter really has to do is go talk to Gwen in school, and it can't be that bad. I mean, he just finished his biology final, he's getting to chop it up with Rand, and of course King Kong. So, you know, things are going well. Shout out my boy Rand, obligatory shout out. Back on track, all Peter really has to do is wait for Gwen to get out of the test, because, well, she's gonna get out almost as fast as he is. The two are extraordinarily smart, and all he has to do is admit his feelings to Gwen and ask to talk to her. He finally asked to get some private time with her. Unfortunately for him, because Parker Luck is a bitch, Liz immediately comes out and starts putting herself all over Peter. I'm 92% sure she did this to like secure her spot against Gwen, but that's just a crackpot theory. Either way, Gwen is pretty miffed by this and instead just ditches Peter. And so now he can't express his feelings, at least not in private. And as well, he's back at ESU's lab. Oh, and reveling in the fact that he can get so many women.
I think Liz Allen really is into me. Gwen, too. Gwen, Liz, Gwen. Web slinging 30 floors up never made me this dizzy.
But as we all know, Spider-Man's not going to be in costume and on screen for too long. That doesn't involve some sort of villain of the week. And that is when we are introduced to Kraven the Hunter. Right now, just going by Kravenoff. He is trying to hunt new big game beast, and he finds his big game beast in Spider-Man. A man-spider hybrid said to be so unbelievably powerful, it would, I don't know, be really difficult for him to take down. He is a hunter after all, and that's all he really cares about, especially since natural wildlife just ain't doing it for him anymore. I mean, the first time that we see Kraven on screen, this dude literally snapped a gun in half with his bare hands. That, and he was able to quite literally manhandle a rhino. Manhandle a rhino. This could have been one of the greatest and most generational adaptations of Kraven the Hunter outside of Insomniac's Spider-Man 2 that we could have ever seen. Mind you, just about every other adaptation of Kraven was quite subpar, and this one was shaping up to be fantastic. You'll see why I said shaping up to be later. I mean, it took like well over a decade to get another decent adaptation of Kraven. I guess the 90s version was decent too, but don't even get me started on the movie. God, the movie. Why? Who let Sony? You know what? We're getting off track. Should I leave that in? You know what? Yeah, sure. Why not? Anyways, getting back on track. Kraven's actually putting up a decent fight against Spider-Man, but Peter's head, let's just say, isn't exactly 100% in the game. He's not really focused on Kraven because he doesn't view Kraven as much of a threat. His spider sense barely even goes off during this fight, which signals to me that Spider-Man doesn't see Kraven as that gigantic of a threat. But you know how inconsistent spider sense can be. We also get to see that Peter did cross off one thing on his list. He got his thermal unders. They're just heart-shaped. Don't you love early 2000s humor? Men wears heart-shaped pants, and it's a laughing stock. But outside of that, Peter pretty much manhandles Kraven no problem, and ends up at Midtown High's championship game taking photos for the Bugle. And ultimately, he ends up showing once again to Gwen his heavy interest in Liz Allen, because he spends a lot of the time there talking to her, hugging her, being all over her. Meanwhile, let me remind you, hasn't spoken to Gwen at all. It's also worth noting, like, Flash gets hurt in this football game, and it's going to lead to some complications between not only Flash and Liz's relationship, but also the relationship between Peter and Liz by that metric. Oh, and this is why I said we could have had a generational Kraven adaptation, because I don't know what they were thinking in the slightest, but they ultimately decided to go with making Kraven a genetically mutated, you know, I don't want to say freak because that's a little harsh, but yeah, a genetically mutated freak. And I could not tell you why they chose to do this, but they ultimately did. The entire idea behind this was the fact that Spider-Man himself is genetically enhanced via gene manipulation thanks to the spider, and Kraven wants to level the playing field, which is cool and all, but again, I don't understand how that's conducive to Kraven's character as a whole. He's not really a big science guy, he's a lot more of a mystical guy, so having him default to science was definitely a little weird because the setup could have been perfect. But ultimately, he gets the new lab assistant at ESU. And by lab assistant, I mean head chair. He's basically in the same level of responsibility as Kirk Connors, except he's evil and bad and works for Norman Osborn. So, you know, time for a new suite of villains, because if the big man ain't making them, somebody's gotta make them. And that is how we officially got Kraven the Hunter. Yeah.
Call me Kraven. Kraven the Hunter.
I genuinely feel like this is one of the few times the show had like a big misstep when it came to adapting a character, which, I mean, for all God damn it. The catchphrase time. For all intents and purposes, they've hit on almost every single character they've decided to change majorly in adaptation. Whether that's Electro, definitely couldn't get any worse than making Electro the son of Red Skull. That's a video for its own day. But, you know, whether it was Electro, Shocker, updating Liz Allen, Mary Jane, Gwen, Harry Osborn, a lot of these characters who didn't even show up until Peter was actually in college, I think they did a really good job. So missing on one, not really that big of a deal, but man did they miss. I'm starting to question if Peter even likes Gwen. That saying actions speak louder than words really just rings true throughout a lot of this second season, because the second Liz calls Peter and Liz goes out of her way to ask for his condolences regarding Flash being hurt, he immediately picks up and he says, "Oh yeah, I'll come console you." Now, granted, could Gwen have called Peter? Yes, but like, come on now. Peter definitely should have been the one to like go talk to her after the fact that, I don't know, Gwen kissed him. But I guess that doesn't really matter now because Liz practically has this dude wrapped around her finger.
I know you two aren't exactly close, but if you just sit with me.
Sure. As long as it takes.
Thanks.
I know this isn't like 100% on topic, but it's more of like a gripe I had with this season specifically. And it's like, every time two female characters talk to each other, especially in this early part of the season on this show, they're only ever talking to further the idea of like dating Peter Parker or getting help to date Peter. It's like they never have any conversations that don't revolve around the man in question they're chasing, which on one hand is a TV show with limited amounts of time and it's a superhero show, but on the other hand, you couldn't find like one episode to, you know, like just have normal conversations and be friends outside of wanting to date Peter Parker. Listen, man, Peter must have just like unimaginable risks. And with that out of the way, the next episode, like in chronological order, like how I like to cover this show, it does like a few things for relationship wise, but more I want to highlight it for plot building. Peter is starting to figure out who the master planner is, essentially the person that hired Mysterio to steal all of those items and pieces of technology that he was picking up in the first episode. We're also introduced to Patches. That guy will be important. like maybe 2 months from now when I do that video. So maybe remember or maybe don't. This episode is far more foundational for setting up the next episode, and also just absolutely being one of the greatest fight episodes, I guess if you want to call it, in the show. The fight scenes in this episode are fantastic. But it also goes out of our way to show us things such as Liz Allen having conflict between whether or not she wants to get with Peter, but also take care of Flash, as she did care for Flash a lot. And even though they're not together anymore, those feelings still exist, which is something that's very realistic. Another thing that's also realistic is Gwen not settling to be the second choice, and it's very, very obvious, through actions at least, that Peter is choosing to make Gwen the second choice. And I really like that she told him off about this, because Gwen really does deserve better. A lot better.
Whoa, look. What did I do to deserve...
Barely said 2 words to me since the you-know-what. So I get it, okay? I'm not your first choice, but I won't be your second choice either.
So of course, what do you do when you strike out on 2 of 3? You still got 1 shot left, right? This is baseball. So yeah, Peter absolutely tries shooting a shot with Mary Jane, and she's slightly more receptive than Gwen, but basically gets him to go get hot chocolate, even though she's really advocating for him to get his head in the game and just make a decision one way or the other, especially because Peter is a very easily distractible boy. But unfortunately for him, he's never gonna get to have that conversation with MJ, because he's got to deal with the Sinister Six? 7? Who knows? It's 6. Why do I write this shit into my scripts? What is wrong with me? The first 2 up, because apparently they don't jump people like the X-Men do. Unfortunate. But the first 2 people up happen to be Vulture and Electro. Mind you, Peter never actually took out the Sinister Six on his own. The symbiote did it, and he was asleep. So he doesn't even remember ripping off the neural link that Vulture has on his head. So when Peter's talking about man, Vulture's really protective of his head, let's use that against him. Vulture's having PTSD out there, bro. And Peter's just playing into it. But ultimately, Vulture is like no biggie to take down. And now is probably the time that I should announce that yes, the Sinister Six are officially back, all thanks to the Master Planner, who was essentially trying to recruit all of the original members, minus everybody's favorite Texan, that being Shocker, and instead replacing him with newly minted villain Kraven the Hunter. But unfortunately, Doc Ock doesn't exactly want to play ball, so instead of having a Sinister 7, we instead are just going to have a Sinister 6. Doc Ock's playing the whole, my arms were doing it all. It wasn't me, it wasn't really me. This episode, in my opinion, has some of the best fight scenes in the show, only rivaled by episodes later in this season. I felt like they really hit a groove when it came to making fight scenes, especially in the second season of this show. I almost feel like they got a higher budget between the fight scenes, the constant suit tearing on Peter. It just, to me, felt like they got a budget increase, which is hilarious because the first season was like 13 episodes and this season's like 13 episodes. We really only got 26 episodes of peak. That's disheartening. But in another fun twist, we get to see O'Hearn and Sandman working together for the very first time since like the midpoint of season 1, which is really cool because those 2 characters haven't really gotten to work together, because they were together in the Sinister Six, but like they were not 2v1ing Spider-Man like they did in the good old days. But ultimately, none of it matters because Peter is Peter and he is taking out just about every member of the Sinister Six, except for the last 2, which happen to be Mysterio and Kraven. I felt like you could have done these pairings a little better, but I guess not. I mean, who would pair Electro with Vulture? Like, Dumb and Dumber is what it felt like. Anyways, on a more important note, Peter ultimately ends up defeating the Sinister Six. None of them get captured because, I don't know, Peter seemingly can't get them to stay in one place long enough to get them captured, thanks to the Master Planner. And of course, Peter now has to deal with the fallout of, oh, I don't know, abandoning all of his friends and appearing as though he nearly died for the 20th time.
I thought you were buried under that tree.
Parker, you are a grade A idiot. Gwen, I know that I've been unfocused.
He's gone.
Yeah, make that 3 episodes in a row where Peter has failed to express his feelings to Gwen. At this point, man, even a phone call would do. Oh, and Otto Octavius gets kidnapped by his arms. Because why not? But if anything good came from this episode, it's that Peter got a wonderful photo of Uncle Ben to help bring him to the first Christmas that Uncle Ben wouldn't be at. Also, yes, this is a Christmas special episode, apparently. So maybe I'll talk about this episode more in detail like 6 winters from now. But eventually, there comes a time when Peter has to finally make a decision about what girl he's actually going to pursue and who he's going to give his affections to. I cannot, why do I write things like this in my script? But the episode starts with him and Norman Osborn doing their whole mentorship thing when unfortunately a bomb that was supposed to blow up an abandoned building when they left gets started instantaneously as though out of nowhere. And of course Peter has to sneak off so that Spider-Man can do his little job. And while that was a little strange, it's nothing too out of the ordinary for Peter's life, so instead he just goes to the coffee shop to hang out with MJ and Gwen, and as much as MJ is desperately prodding this man to express his feelings for Gwen, anytime Liz shows up in the vicinity, he chooses Liz, without fail. He even goes to defend her from Flash being Flash, and unfortunately, that's all that Peter will see of Gwen for the rest of that day. Because for whatever reason, the entire city is experiencing horrible malfunctions, and to make things even worse, Gwen gets kidnapped by the most incompetent of the Sinister Six, that being Electro. All at the behest and order of the Master Planner. But you know, Peter is not gonna let that slide in the slightest, and so instead he goes after both the Thinker and Electro. And Peter goes full Batman, because if there's one thing you know about him is do not touch Gwen.
Both know the hero won't do anything rash.
He called my bluff, so I'll have to bluff better.
Fun fact, I actually was totally convinced Gwen was gonna die in this episode, because I owned the first season of this show on DVD, but we did not own the second season. So by the time I got around to watching the second season, it was like 2015. I had already watched Spider-Man 2, and my first thought that jumped to my head was, oh yeah, Gwen's gonna die just like she died in Spider-Man 2. Yeah, just a fun fact, I didn't know this show had a second season until like 2015-ish, when I just saw it in like the Google Play Store on my iPad or something. So like I was wholeheartedly convinced that Gwen was biting the dust immediately, which is like pretty bold for a kids TV show, you know. But hey, they managed to do it with Mary Jane in the 90s show. And thanks to Peter's absolutely perfect terror techniques, he does eventually get the ideas out of the Thinker as to where the Master Planner is holding Gwen and the rest of his gang up at. And that would be a literal underwater base, which just is so Otto Octavius. Oh yeah, and spoiler, I don't even know why this show's almost 20 years old. Spoiler alert, the Master Planner is Otto Octavius. I mean, just look at the crew he's got around him. It's the Sinister Six, and his right-hand man is Electro. Basically, Otto Octavius has been playing at being normal and reformed so that he can create a device that literally allows him to tap in to every single electrical device around the city of New York, and hopefully the entire police and criminal database, including the FBI's database, banking on the plan that he's going to kidnap Captain Stacy's daughter, Gwen, and use her ultimately to get Captain Stacy to give him access, backdoor access, into the NYPD. The FBI claim is unverifiable. Don't know why I even said that. So yeah, Otto Octavius is a big bad guy, and he is quite literally spending the entire episode blackmailing Captain Stacy into doing his bidding. Also worth noting, Captain Stacy will continue to take up a far more prominent role as a character throughout this second season, but we're not gonna get to that today. But back on topic to Peter. it's kind of funny, like throughout this entire season, we've seen his actions of Peter Parker have spoke nothing more than to liking Liz, or even at some points preferring MJ, but every single act he takes as Spider-Man through the first and second season are all clearly showing just how much he loves Gwen. But unfortunately, those are acts she will never see nor understand, because Peter's not just gonna reveal that he's Spider-Man to Gwen. Could you imagine dropping that kind of a bombshell on the girl that you want to date and you've been friends with your entire life? Yeah, wouldn't want to be in that situation. But eventually, Peter not only beats the Sinister Six, but also lets Octavius go, all in the event to hopefully save Gwen. And we are also treated to a beautiful rendition of the Amazing Spider-Man issue 33, in which Peter has to lift a gigantic piece of rubble off of himself in order to help Aunt May and to save her life. But in this context, it is his love for Gwen that spurs him on into saving the day. Because at the end of the day, I do truly feel like Peter's heart firmly lies with Gwen, and that is who he actually would love long term. But we'll get to that later. Instead, enjoy this.
Fought the good fight. Did my best. Even foiled Doc's plan. No one could ask any more of me. What am I doing? I can't give up. Not with Gwen depending on me.
I also absolutely love the suit ripping and straining as he uses literally every muscle in his body to power this up. Just very powerful visual storytelling. Yeah, very surface level observation there, genius. Anyways, most importantly, he saves Electro, who, gosh, man, Otto Octavius just does not give a care. Yeah, let's use that word. Doesn't give a care about any of his guys. Peter ultimately has to save the day, and he does so. Gwen gets home safely to her father, and her father, being, you know, a good dad, like any good dad should, is not letting Gwen get on the phone and is trying to have her enjoy a quiet night in, especially considering this is the second extremely traumatic event she's experienced within like the last 3 months tops. So when Peter calls to express his feelings, it is of no surprise that he gets met with Captain Gwen Stacy instead. But because this happens, unfortunately, Peter ends up making, I'm not gonna say the wrong choice, but he ends up making a choice that leads to a lot of different outcomes.
Shouldn't you be, Flash?
Thing is, I'll always care about Flash. But tonight I told him it's over. Really, really over. See, I want to be with you.
Liz chose Peter, and Peter ultimately decided to choose Liz in that moment instead of Gwen. And it's absolutely insane because Gwen has like just now gotten her phone back. Dude, this show is such a tease, man. And yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave it today. This is way shorter than I wanted this video to be, but like, man, life has been lifing, and having to deal with a lot of things, and I got sick. Having to do some family stuff, and I got sick, so it prolonged this recording. John Cena turned heel. I mean, shit, I'd turn heel too if I lost to the Royal Rumble by Jey Uso, but John Cena turned heel. I don't know if that's relevant to most of you, but yeah, I've been looking to include that in the script, and I could not find a better place for it. Lots of life stuff, lots of school stuff. But hey, spring break's coming up, so hopefully more time for me to hopefully make some videos in bulk, please. To my crowd on YouTube, you all are absolutely fantastic. Thank you all so much for watching. The support on these Spectacular Spider-Man videos is insane, and I'm so glad to see it. If you want to help out the channel, leaving a like helps out a lot. If you want to sub, it's free. You can always unsubscribe later. If you feel like the video was bad, dislike it, and then tell me down below in the comments why, as constructive criticism helps me to be a better creator for all of you. And of course, if you want to support me even further, but don't feel like you have to, I do have a Patreon in which you'll see each and every one of these videos early, completely unedited, so not having to deal with any of the copyright protection stuff that I put on my channel, so I can, you know, get paid and pay my college tuition. But as well, just, you know, saying a thank you to me as a creator, which is of the utmost appreciation from me. And if you're in the $5 or above tier, I will shout you out at each and every one of these, the end of each and every one of these videos. Gosh, I'm terrible at this. So without further ado, shout out Megan, shout out eFrosty13, shout out Gabriel Lafonte, Transgears1, Video Gamer 75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Rawson, Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing, and I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.